things in life aren't permanent, then why try to preserve them or hold on to them? Hello and welcome. I'm Sadhika Tiwari and you're watching Eco India. So many aspects of life, nature, and our surroundings will outlive us and maybe even the generation after us, like this ancient tree. But nature is precious and it is worth preserving. Where are all the birds that I saw growing up? I remember watching hundreds of them as they fluttered across the sky. Human activities and habitat loss are a few among the many threats that birds face today, which have also led to a decline in their numbers. A young man from India's desert state of Rajasthan is working with an organization to get these birds back into the sky.
Colorful kites are everywhere in Rajasthan in January. Millions of people fly them to celebrate Makar Sankranti, the Hindu festival that marks the start of the harvest season. What is beautiful to look at, though, can be very dangerous for birds. That's when Bhupendra Parayata steps in for a rescue mission.
बर्ड अभी आपके पास ही रखा है?
The bird is with you, right?
ठीक है, हम लोग निकल रहे हैं।
We are on the way.
आपके पास थोड़ी देर में पहुंच जाएंगे।
The 23-year-old is working with Raksha, an organization in Jaipur that specializes in the rescue and rehabilitation of injured birds and other wildlife.
यहाँ से करीब
We have
5
received a
किलोमीटर
bird rescue call from Mansarovar, about 5 kilometers from here. They said that a bird collapsed in the night and it is not able to fly.
During the winter months, when thousands of migratory birds flock here, Bhupendra finds himself responding to many more calls. He has been working as a rescue volunteer for 7 years and is experienced in dealing with little patients like this one.
कब आया था आपके
When
पास?
did it come here?
कल शाम को।
Yesterday?
It's a pigeon that has a deep cut in its wing.
ओहो, मांझा लग रहा है। पूरा मांझे
It was
से लगा
injured
हुआ
by
है।
a manjha.
Chinese manja is used to fly many of the kites here. It's a string that's coated with powdered glass. Despite a ban, its use persists. Residents like Sushil often encounter incidents of bird injuries involving kite strings.
Yesterday we were at our showroom and suddenly I have seen there was a thread, around this pigeon and it was full of blood. You can see that the blood is all around. I have taken that pigeon and I have kept it in this tagari and I have kept some clothes so that at least he can save till morning. So thanks to you that you came in the morning and you have saved him, this bird. Thank you.
During the 4 days of the Makar Sankranti kite flying festival, the bird rescuers receive between 700 to 800 calls. Bhupendra has been trained to deal with birds harmed by glass-coated kite strings.
उस टाइम पे मैं आया था जब मुझे भी इस तरह से
When I
सिखाया गया
joined,
था
I was
कि bird को
taught
किस
how
तरह से
to
handle
handle a
करना है।
bird.
और
If a
bird
bird
अगर
is more
active है,
active,
वो
if
उछल-कूद
it's
कर रहा है,
jumping
भाग रहा
around
है,
a lot
वो
because it's
पेन
in
में है तो
pain
वो इधर-उधर
and
उछलेगा,
doesn't
कूदेगा,
understand
कोई
what's
उसको
going
नहीं
on,
पता कि वो
we need to cover
अपने
its
कपड़ों को
eyes.
किसके
We
लिए लेके
use
जा रहा है।
towels to hold it.
तो वो सब कुछ
All
आइस
this
कवर
is
करना
also
bird को
taught to new
towel से
volunteers
handle
who
करना,
join
वो
the
सब कुछ
shelter.
पहले हम सिखाते हैं शेल्टर पे जो न्यू वॉलंटियर आते हैं।
Despite the bird rescuers' efforts, not every bird injured by kite strings can be saved. The animal rights group PETA India says this type of string maims and kills thousands of birds annually.
The kite string, the manja now, is so strong that even an adult vulture flying into it, just wouldn't break, and then that will cause these horrible traumatic injuries. I believe there's some research being done into what time of the day is less likely to cause birds to be injured, but because Rajasthan is a massive pathway for migratory birds, we're seeing huge numbers injured. So I would just ask people to consider the knock-on effect of flying kites at this time of the year.
It was witnessing such a heartbreaking incident that inspired Rohit to establish the Bird Rescue NGO back in 2003.
I was riding on my pillion and there's a bird which fell right in front of me and I couldn't help the bird and the bird died. So at that time I started praying, like I think the bird will come back to life, but it didn't. So I was really upset and I thought something has to be done for this. This is what I thought, and by next year we started a rescue work.
Birds are not only at risk during the kite festival. City growth is also putting avian populations under pressure. The expansion of the concrete jungle is encroaching upon natural habitats, leaving birds with limited space for nesting and feeding. A recent report on the state of India's birds found around 60% of species are in decline. The trend is concerning because birds play a vital role.
In particularly cities, we have habitat loss. All areas are being developed, houses are being constructed, big buildings are being constructed, and our developmental practices are such that they're actually driving the birds away. They're very helpful in cross pollinating, right? And they help us in controlling the populations of the insects also, pests also. There are many birds, for example, locusts. If you look at the locust, wherever the locusts go, right, they devastate the entire fields, agricultural fields. If we have birds there, they feed on locusts. The damage caused by the locusts could be controlled by the birds also.
Raksha says it saved more than 13,000 birds. Just like in any hospital, the team first assesses the patient's wounds and determines whether surgery is necessary. Once recovered, the birds are set free again.
Release check. So generally it's on a release check. So we generally check what height the bird is flying. Is it able to perch? It's exhibiting its natural behaviors.
This bird of prey has already recovered well and is now ready to leave Raksha's shelter. It's always a moving moment for the bird rescuers to see one of their patients spread its wings and take to the skies again.
Around a quarter of the world's soil is degraded. Among other things, this means that it lacks critical nutrients that we need to grow our food. One of these nutrients is phosphorus, a chemical element that the world is running out of. So how do we replenish it? Well, the answer lies in our loo breaks. Well, you heard that right. Find out for yourself.
What's in our bones, DNA, and feeds 8 billion people? Phosphorus. It's an essential element that sustains all life on Earth. It's also in your pee. More on that later. But the vast majority of it goes to making fertilizer. Why? Because without it, we wouldn't be able to grow enough food. The problem is that there's a finite amount, and roughly 70% of it comes from one place. The bigger problem is that we're wasting most of what's already there.
Every individual is just throwing away a loaf of bread every day.
For countries like India, which is 90% dependent on imports, the dwindling access could be alarming. Plus, phosphorus is also causing some massive algae issues. But if the world's food security depends on it, what can we do about the potential shortage? What alternatives do we have? And could our own pee save us? Thanks to a German scientist boiling hundreds of gallons of urine in 1669, we found phosphorus, the 15th element in the periodic table. Fun fact, he was trying to find out how to make gold. Anyway, what is phosphorus?
All organisms need phosphorus. It's an essential nutrient, and an essential component of life.
This is Barbara Cade Menon. She's a renowned soil scientist based in Saskatchewan, Canada.
It's part of our DNA. It's part of our cell walls, contain phospholipids. It's part of our RNA.
Today, roughly 80% of the world's phosphorus is used for agriculture. Because it's a structural component of cells, it's essential for cell division and plant development. Without enough of it, plants are stunted and don't yield as much. We've been increasingly using these chemical fertilizers on farms since the post-World II period. Together with crop engineering, it spurred the Green Revolution. This saw massive increases in crop yields, especially in the global south and places like India.
In 1960, our food production was near about 80 million tons. Last year, our food production reached up to 315 million tons.
Sudeshna Bhattacharya is a scientist at the Indian Institute of Soil Science.
I definitely will give this credit to fertilizer application because before there was no knowledge about that.
Worldwide fertilizer use increased 6 times from 1950 to 2000. So where do we get all of it from? To answer that question, we first need to show you the world's longest conveyor belt system, which can be seen from space. It's transporting the raw material, phosphate rock, from the Bukra mine across the Western Sahara Desert. Roughly 70% of the world's reserves are in the Western Sahara, a heavily disputed territory currently controlled by Morocco, which the UN says has been unlawfully occupying the area. A rebel army has been fighting for its independence. The largest reserves are spread across North Africa, followed by China, Brazil, South Africa, and Saudi Arabia. This scarcity makes prices extremely volatile. During the global financial crisis in 2008, a shortage in phosphorus fertilizer shot prices up 500% and fueled riots in places like India, Kenya, Nigeria, and Pakistan. Phosphate rock is a non-renewable resource, and we can't substitute it in the growth of organisms. Some scientists have warned that we're approaching peak phosphorus, but Barbara seems to think otherwise.
I was a child in the 70s. I remember peak oil, and yet have we actually reached peak oil where there's a crisis? No, because it becomes economically feasible to find alternatives.
In fact, less than 20% of the phosphorus used in agriculture actually ends up in the food we eat. That's partly because phosphate fertilizer is notoriously inefficient. It binds easily with other minerals in the soil, which makes it unavailable for the plant.
We're like applying 100 kg of phosphorus. A plant is able to get only 8 to 10 kg. Some part will go to nearest water body, but maybe 80% of that will be precipitated in soil.
That's why the industry's solution is to chuck more onto the soil.
Phosphorus was relatively cheap. Adding a bit is good, a bit more will guarantee profits.
This accumulated phosphorus is called legacy phosphate. How much phosphorus is lost in the soil also depends on the soil pH. Too acidic, like in wet climates, and it'll bind to iron and aluminum. Too alkaline, it'll react with calcium. But this has consequences. The use of chemical fertilizers increases the runoff of nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus into bodies of water. It leads to eutrophication, which kills off oxygen. It also causes massive algal blooms, which can be toxic and produce earth-warming methane when they die.
Contaminated water is plaguing through Southwest Florida's shores.
San Francisco Bay Area is experiencing a toxic algae bloom.
And it's not just the waste from agriculture that's rampant. Phosphorus is everywhere, in our food, our tap water. So if we consume a lot of it, then that means...
essentially what's coming out is the same.
This is Jenna Senekal. She's a researcher at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences and also started a company that turns urine and feces into fertilizer.
1 out of 10 people are like, that is disgusting. The amount of nutrients that are in urine is enough to grow 500 grams of wheat. So basically it means your urine, you could be producing a loaf of bread every day.
She and her colleagues designed a system that essentially boils down our excreta and retains its nutrients. How? With a urine-diverting toilet. These toilets can get expensive, and it leaves the problem up to the individual consumer. But Jenna says she's been approached by building companies interested in installing them in new houses. And her company already has a partnership with Swedish public toilet rental firms.
If we were to recirculate all of our urine, and we could actually replace 8% of the global demand of phosphorus.
Unfortunately, household pee is just a small fraction of all the nutritious waste on Earth. There's also phosphorus in sludge and industrial wastewater, not to mention manure from livestock and dairy farming. One of the most scalable solutions is to figure out how to get all of it out and reuse it.
Right now, sewage treatment plants, it's to get the water cleaner, we're not looking at it as extracting resources. We're not thinking of it as mining resources, but why not?
The industry is still figuring out how to improve existing technologies to make large-scale removal economically viable. There's also been advancements in methods of extracting phosphorus from animal manure.
There's no shortage of technologies. It's just right now, it's still more cost-effective to ship rock from Morocco than it is to try to get it from all these other sources.
We can also start earlier in the process and help plants absorb more of phosphorus. Recent research has shown that certain types of fungi and bacteria could be used in the future to improve crop yield and soil health.
aim fungi. These are actually group of fungi. They are a like very good phosphorus scavenger, you can say. They can extend their hyphae and scavenge phosphorus from area where plant root cannot reach.
Scientists are still researching how these microbes could be used for large-scale farming, however. Transitioning to such organic agriculture takes time and could result in yield losses, a risk farmers are hesitant to take. But legislation could help move the market along. The EU recently legalized the scale of phosphorus recovered from sludge as fertilizer and is working on laws that will require more phosphorus to be removed from wastewater.
Phosphorus is actually quite easy to recycle. If the government all of a sudden says, hey, you have to recycle 15% of the phosphorus that's in your wastewater, then innovations finally have a chance to come to light and start to implement.
Frankly, the cost of it is going to drive a lot of innovation. When it was cheap, no one valued it. I am optimistic, and maybe I'm just optimistic in general, but to me, the recognition that it's there and we're talking about it, and maybe it will trigger the pea revolution.
Dump yards are not just a problem while they exist, but they continue to be a problem even years after they're gone. Toxic substances leach into the ground and almost completely destroy it. But there is a group of women in the southern Indian state of Tamil Nadu who are not just cleaning up these dump yards, but also reclaiming the land and turning it into something beautiful.
Until a few years ago, this was just a barren wasteland. Now, it's a beautiful garden. We are in a residential area in Pilamedu, on the eastern edge of Coimbatore in southern India. The garden was created by Tenimori Mohan Kumar. She moved to the area so that her daughters could study here.
This place is exactly opposite my house. It was just used as a dump yard. When I asked people about it, they said it had been like this for 36 to 37 years. They even found it quite scary to walk past this plot.
The one who most inspired her to address the problem was her mentor, C.R. Swaminathan, the former CEO of Coimbatore's PSG college. He supported her idea right from the start.
But within 20 days, he passed away. Still, his words urging me to change this place sealed my determination.
Her first step was to do some research. It soon became clear that the land was a so-called reservation, owned by the state. Such areas often lie waste and quickly become a dumping ground.
If people start dumping garbage somewhere, it's hard to stop them. So many were against me. They'd randomly yell at me. I was browbeaten. They were just waiting for me to fail. But I took it as a challenge.
Tenimori Mohan Kumar faced a lot of red tape before she could get permission to redesign the area. After that, it took just a few months to transform the wasteland into a garden, and her neighbors love it.
One plus about the garden is that the flowers attract different varieties of butterfly. Also, there are 6 ducks and a rabbit. So the kids love coming here. They call it the duck park. This park stands out as everything is integrated here. It's entirely different from other children's parks.
Initially, we were eager to see what this place would become. Tenmori's determination and hard work has changed it into a beautiful garden.
There are many unused reserve areas in Coimbatore that belong to the state. Tenimori Mohan Kumar has now been commissioned to turn them into parks too.
Many residential areas in Coimbatore have parks that are not maintained. People in those areas shouldn't wait for corporations or NGOs or even some strangers to take action. Residents should join forces and change the place. That would benefit their entire surroundings.
Once Tenimori Mohan Kumar's daughters have finished their studies, she'll move away again. Her hope is that local residents will then continue to maintain their garden.
From a garbage dump, let's head to one of the most scenic cities in the world, which has been celebrated in Hollywood, Bollywood, and world cinema for decades. The romantic city of Venice. But as the world heats and glaciers melt, the future of this city seems shaky. More and more of this city is sinking each passing day, and it is becoming a big challenge to keep this city afloat.
Venice has fascinated the world for over 1,600 years. And for just as long, people have been scared of floods or worried that the city could sink into the sea. This is the latest attempt to protect Venice. 78 metal barriers that can be raised to separate the sea from the lagoon. The system is called MOSE.
If we hadn't had MOSE, Venice would have been irreparably destroyed on November 22nd, 2022. It was the second highest flood in history, but nothing happened. We were able to protect the lagoon and Venice.
Elisabetta Spitz has already given the order to raise the barriers over 50 times. And she's having to do it increasingly frequently.
We now know that MOSE is a flexible instrument that does not always have to be opened, nor at the same time. Today we know much more about floods and winds, so we're in a position to act against flooding, to use the MOSE system only partially, and to guarantee the exchange of water between the sea and the lagoon.
Does that mean Venice can be saved? Climate experts predict that the sea level could rise by 60 centimeters by the end of the century. The oceanographer Georg Umgiese says that MOSE is just buying time.
Is MOSE enough to save Venice? Yes, at the moment. Definitely in the next 10, 20 or 30 years. But if the sea level rises by 50 centimeters, it will have to be used 300 to 400 times. That's once a day. It won't manage. MOSE won't be able to cope as a structure, but nor will the lagoon manage, because it needs the exchange of water.
Marco Sicovini from the Venice Institute of Marine Sciences is researching the lagoon's ecosystem. He says the frequency with which MOSE is being used has not yet had any major consequences, but this could change if the lagoon is separated from the sea more frequently and for longer periods of time.
It could be that at some point we'll have to decide whether it makes sense to maintain the lagoon as a saltwater lagoon or not. The long closures interrupt the cycle between the sea and the lagoon, which is fundamental for Venice. It's what creates the lagoon floor, which determines what plants and animals can live there. We're going to face tough decisions.
Whether to save the lagoon or the city. Venetians would ideally keep both. Piazza San Marco is the lowest point of Venice and the first to flood. Work is currently underway to raise the square.
If it were raised to 110 centimeters, then the square would no longer be underwater, because it would manage up to 110 centimeter without flooding. And at over 110 centimeter, the MOSE system would close. So in other words, there would be no more flooding on Piazza San Marco.
He believes we need to have faith, that people often forget that Venice has sunk 30 centimeters in the past 150 years. Too much groundwater has been pumped from the city's aquifers. But groundwater could also help save the city from disaster.
If the water that's been pumped out is pumped back in, then Venice could rise by 30 centimeters again. That would be the exact 30 centimeters that we've lost in the past 150 years. So we would be going back, starting at zero again, so to speak.
He says that Venice as we know it cannot last forever in any case. At some point, the lagoon will have to be separated from the sea, and that Venetians will be forced to decide.
Both cannot be rescued. We have to decide what to save. Venice. There is only one Venice.
A difficult decision. One Venetians hope they will never have to make.
Ah, a world without Venice. Like I said at the beginning of this episode, some things are just too precious to let go. What is threatening the nature around you, and what do you think can be done to preserve it? Let us know. You can email us or reach out to me directly on my social media handles. I will see you next week. Until then, take care, goodbye, namaskar.